The relationship between the United States and Iran is one of the most complex and volatile on the global stage. It is a tangled web of geopolitical strategy, economic warfare, and ideological division that has defined the Middle East for over half a century. The United States, the world's preeminent superpower with a population of over 330 million, and Iran, a formidable regional power with more than 88 million citizens, find themselves locked in a struggle that has repeatedly teetered on the edge of open conflict. For over 4 decades, they have operated without formal diplomatic ties, their interactions defined by hostility and mutual suspicion. To understand why these two nations are such bitter adversaries, and why a single spark could still ignite a catastrophic war, one must look back at the foundations of their conflict. It begins not with politics, but with a natural resource that would become the lifeblood of the modern world: oil. In the early 20th century, British prospectors first struck oil in the Iranian desert. These initial findings soon revealed a stunning truth. Iran was sitting on the 4th largest proven oil reserves on the planet. It was a sleeping energy superpower, but the strategic value of this discovery came with a brutal cost. The British exploited this wealth, establishing the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which would later evolve into the global giant BP. For decades, the British controlled Iran's oil industry, reaping immense profits while leaving the Iranian people with a fraction of the revenue. This economic subjugation fueled a fierce resentment of foreign intervention and sparked a burning desire for national independence. This desire culminated in 1951 when a charismatic and democratically elected prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, moved to nationalize Iran's oil industry. It was a bold act of defiance against the British Empire, and one that threatened the West's supply chain. However, the geopolitical reality of the time was dominated by the Cold War, and the United States and Britain feared that Mossadegh's government was drifting dangerously close to the Soviet orbit. Believing they were protecting their interests, the American and British intelligence agencies orchestrated a covert operation in 1953 to overthrow Mossadegh. They replaced him with a monarch who would be far more favorable to the West: Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the Shah of Iran. The 1953 coup is often cited as the foundational trauma in the American-Iranian relationship. It was a stark demonstration that the West would prioritize its access to oil over Iranian democracy. For the next 26 years, the Shah ruled as an autocrat, modernizing Iran at a rapid pace, but suppressing political dissent through his brutal secret police. The United States embraced the Shah as a pillar of stability in the region, selling him vast quantities of advanced weaponry and ignoring the increasingly volatile domestic situation. While the regime brought economic growth and secular reforms, it alienated the deeply traditional and religious segments of Iranian society, creating an undercurrent of simmering revolution. In 1979, that undercurrent erupted. The Iranian Revolution, a populist uprising fueled by religious fervor and anti-Western sentiment, swept the Shah from power. The revolution was led by Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, a cleric who had been exiled for his opposition to the Shah. His return to Iran marked the end of a monarchical system and the birth of the Islamic Republic. The revolutionaries viewed the United States as the Great Satan, the ultimate symbol of imperialistic corruption. This newfound animosity reached a breaking point when a group of militant students seized the American embassy in Tehran, taking 52 American diplomats and citizens hostage. This hostage crisis, which lasted for 444 days, shattered any remnant of trust between the nations. It crippled the American presidency of Jimmy Carter and ensured that Iran was firmly categorized as a state sponsor of terrorism in the American psyche. In 1980, Iraq, under the leadership of Saddam Hussein, invaded Iran, launching a brutal 8-year war. The United States, while officially neutral, tilted its support toward Iraq, providing intelligence and resources to prevent an Iranian victory and expansion of its revolutionary ideology. To the American leadership, containing Iran was paramount, and they were willing to ally with Hussein to do so. This decision further entrenched the conflict, transforming it into a zero-sum game where one side's success was automatically a victory for the other. The conflict then evolved into a shadow war that extended far beyond the battlefield. In 1988, the U.S. Navy shot down Iran Air Flight 655, a civilian passenger plane, killing 290 people. The U.S. claimed it was a tragic accident, a mistaken identity in a tense naval engagement. For Iran, however, it was an act of murder that has never been fully atoned for, deepening the well of historical grievance. The 1990s were marked by a policy of dual containment, where America sought to isolate both Iran and Iraq simultaneously. The collapse of the Soviet Union left Iran searching for a new strategic foothold, but America's economic sanctions and political pressure kept the state isolated. The dawn of the 21st century brought a dramatic geopolitical shift. The American invasion of Afghanistan in 2001 removed the Taliban, a mutual enemy of both Washington and Tehran. For a fleeting moment, the two countries cooperated, sharing intelligence to dismantle the Taliban regime. Many believed this could be a turning point, but this thaw was incredibly short-lived. The following year, President George W. Bush included Iran in an axis of evil with North Korea and Iraq, a rhetorical assault that shocked Iranian moderates who had hoped for reconciliation. The subsequent invasion of Iraq in 2003 dismantled Iran's archenemy, Saddam Hussein, and replaced his Sunni-dominated regime with a Shia-majority government that was naturally more aligned with Tehran. From Iran's perspective, America had inadvertently handed them the single greatest strategic victory they had ever achieved, solidifying their regional influence. During this period, Iran's nuclear program became the primary point of contention for the U.S. The program, which Iran insists is for peaceful energy purposes, has caused deep alarm in the West and Israel, who suspect it as a front for developing nuclear weapons. The international community, led by the United States, imposed crippling sanctions, strangling the Iranian economy and targeting its vital oil exports. This confrontation reached a new peak in 2015 when the Obama administration, alongside other world powers, signed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, commonly known as the Iran nuclear deal. Under this agreement, Iran accepted strict limits on its uranium enrichment in exchange for substantial relief from economic sanctions. It was a monumental diplomatic victory and a glimmer of hope for a new chapter in relations. Many international observers celebrated it as a necessary step to avoid war. However, the deal was fiercely criticized by American conservatives and allies like Israel, who argued it did not go far enough and left Iran with a pathway to developing a bomb once the restrictions expired. This division culminated in 2018, when President Donald Trump withdrew the United States from the deal. His administration implemented a policy of maximum pressure, reimposing sanctions so stringent that they choked off nearly all of Iran's oil revenue and pushed its economy into a deep recession. The Iranian government, feeling betrayed by the U.S. abandonment of the agreement, responded by gradually violating the deal's terms, restarting aspects of its nuclear enrichment program. The tit-for-tat escalation quickly escalated into military provocations. In January 2020, the conflict entered one of its most perilous phases. A U.S. drone strike assassinated Iran's most powerful military commander, Major General Qasem Soleimani. He was the architect of Iran's proxy network across the Middle East, and his killing was a breathtakingly brazen act of war. Iran retaliated with a ballistic missile strike on American military bases in Iraq. Remarkably, no U.S. soldiers were killed, a fact that many analysts believe was a calculated Iranian move to save face while avoiding a full-scale American reprisal. For a few days, the world held its breath, waiting for a war that would inevitably draw in allies across the globe. The U.S. and Iran stood on the precipice. This narrow escape did not resolve the underlying tensions. It merely punctuated the historical narrative with a stark reminder of the dangers. The conflict today is characterized by a complex shadow war. It manifests in cyber attacks targeting Iranian nuclear facilities and American infrastructure. It involves attacks on oil tankers in the vital Strait of Hormuz, and it is fueled by proxy warfare, where Iran supports groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthis in Yemen, while the U.S. maintains a robust military presence in the Persian Gulf. The core of the conflict is not merely a disagreement over nuclear technology. It is a fundamental clash of identities. The Iranian regime sees the United States as a global bully that seeks to dominate its region and impose its will on the Islamic Republic. They view themselves as the standard-bearers of a unique anti-imperialist ideology, a beacon for the oppressed. Conversely, the United States views the Iranian regime as a destabilizing force, a state sponsor of terrorism that threatens its key allies, Israel and Saudi Arabia. Furthermore, internal politics on both sides often prevent reconciliation. In Iran, hostility toward the U.S. is a pillar of the regime's legitimacy, justifying its repressive rule by externalizing threats. In the U.S., maintaining a hard line on Iran is often a bipartisan foreign policy touchstone, ensuring that diplomatic overtures are often met with profound skepticism. The possibility of a future conflict remains alarmingly high. As the United States maintains its military dominance and Israel grows increasingly anxious about an Iranian nuclear breakout, the region remains a powder keg. Should diplomatic efforts to revive the nuclear deal fail, or should there be another miscalculation in the Persian Gulf, the spiral toward war would be rapid. Unlike the missile strikes of 2020, a full-scale war would not be contained to a few bases. It would likely involve the Strait of Hormuz being mined, attacks on oil infrastructure across Saudi Arabia, and devastating air campaigns that would draw in Gulf states and European powers. This is the precarious legacy of 1953, the revolution, the hostage crisis, and the decades of sanctions. It is a legacy of deep-seated mistrust where historical grievances have created a political and psychological barrier so high that it seems almost impossible to scale. The paths to war are numerous and well-trodden. The paths to peace are narrow and obscured. For the millions of people in both nations, and indeed for the stability of the entire world, the resolution of this conflict remains the defining geopolitical challenge of the 21st century. The history of their estrangement shows us that the status quo is a state of permanent crisis, and without a fundamental shift in ideology or leadership, the tragedy of the past may yet become the catastrophe of the future.